Hello and welcome to Freed Indeed Live. I'm your host, Kevin J.N. Hughes, and I'm delighted to bring you this episode of Freed Indeed Live. I really enjoy doing this, and so I am just really excited to bring this to you. Before I get into it, if you like what we do here on this show, please like this video, comment with a supportive comment, subscribe so that you can see future content, and just a reminder to everybody, you have to hit that little bell now on YouTube. I know it's weird. I don't know why YouTube has done this, but yeah, if you don't hit the bell, they won't show our content to you for some reason. Now, with that said, if you want to support the show, you can do so in the link in the description below, or you can support us by heading on over to godthefatherapparel.com and using promo code FREED, and you will be able to find great, good quality Christian t-shirts that you can wear for working out, that you can wear for not just t-shirts, also sweatshirts and sweaters and all kinds of things that you can wear for working out or hanging out with friends. Really good quality stuff. And so check that out, and remember to use promo code FREED so that you'll get a discount and you'll be supporting Freed Indeed Ministries. So without further ado, let's get into our topic today. Now, I was going to have an interview with somebody, but that kind of fell through, which is totally fine. I understand everybody's got their own things, but I decided that, we've been talking a lot about the afterlife. We've been talking about this book, The Soul After Death by Father Seraphim Rose. We've been doing a book club on that. And in our Wednesday morning class, going through apologetics and biblical counseling. Right now, we've been going through the book Running Scared, and one of the topics in that book was the fear of death and also the fear of the Last Judgment. So we've been talking a lot about these concepts, and so I wanted to address a topic that, frankly, I don't see tons of people addressing from a Christian perspective here on YouTube, and that is the topic of what's called reincarnation in the broader sphere. In philosophical discussion, this is usually termed the transmigration of the soul. So I'm going to talk about a couple of reasons why Christianity on the whole rejects the notion of reincarnation or transmigration of the soul. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Now, and I'm also going to talk about, or I might have to do a part 2 where we talk about some other things as well. But for now, I want to hit this topic. So before we get too far into it, let's take a look at what it is we're actually talking about, what it is that people who believe in the transmigration of the soul actually believe. So let's take a look. This is from Encyclopedia Britannica. Their definition of reincarnation is as follows. Reincarnation, also called the transmigration or metempsychosis, in religion and philosophy, is the rebirth of the aspect of an individual that persists after bodily death, whether it be the conscious mind, the soul, or some other aspect or entity, in one or more successive existences. Depending on the tradition, these existences may be exclusively human, animal, spiritual, or in some instances, vegetable. While belief in the reincarnation is a characteristic of South Asian and East Asian traditions, it also appears in the religious and philosophical thought of local regions, in some ancient Middle Eastern traditions, such as the Greek Orphic mystery or salvation religion, Manichaeanism, and also Gnosticism, as well as in religious movements such as Theosophy, although I think that Theosophy is getting it from Hinduism, so it's not really a separate tradition. But anyway, in many local religions, the belief in multiple souls is common. The soul is frequently viewed as capable of leaving the body through the mouth or nostrils and being reborn, for example, as a bird, butterfly, or insect. The Vedanta of Southern Africa belief, the Venda of Southern African belief is that when a person dies, the soul stays near the grave for a short time and then seeks a new resting place or another body, human, mammal, or reptile. And then it's going to go through different beliefs regarding the transmigration of the soul, but I think you guys get the picture. So now I'm going to say off the bat that I don't necessarily think that my arguments will be convincing to someone who's not a Christian. So like I said, we can do more videos about this in the future where we engage with this from different perspectives and debate the subject more thoroughly. But I honestly think that the arguments that I'm about to proffer will be most compelling if you are convinced of Christianity. But hopefully, at least some of these arguments will have some force, or I should say, perhaps, that because of that, I think a good first step is to establish here and now a good reason to believe Christianity is true. Because if you're a Hindu, then what I'm about to say probably won't seem very convincing unless you first come to conclude that Christianity is true or at least plausible. So, why should you be a Christian? Well, in a nutshell, I have lots of videos on this. I have lots of videos about how the false gods are demons and that worshiping false gods is actually uniting ourselves to demons, and that Jesus has conquered sin, death, and hell. But from an apologetics standpoint, one thing that's worthy of note is that Jesus alone has conquered the grave. And because Jesus alone has conquered the grave, he has given proof to his claims, and therefore the knowledge of God found in Jesus Christ is inherently superior to any other truth claim that could be proffered, because any other philosopher or religious leader can't demonstrate that their claim is true by rising from the dead. Since they have not done so, only Jesus Christ has risen from the dead, claiming to be God. So Jesus Christ, having returned from the grave, is the ultimate vindication of the Christian faith. And the fact that the resurrection is the best explanation of the historical facts that we have, as Michael Licona, for example, has argued in his book on the history of the resurrection, and as Gary Habermas has argued from a very scholarly perspective. Basically, the point being that if you are a consistently rigorous historian, you cannot help but conclude that the resurrection of Jesus Christ is the best explanation of the data that we have. So, or at least the very minimum, you would have to conclude that the resurrection of Jesus Christ was most certainly believed by his followers, the apostles, and that this was something that they passed on. So, so if you're a Christian, I don't believe that you can unite that belief with belief in reincarnation. And so if you're a Hindu and you're watching this, or a Muslim and you're watching this, and you have at least you can go and examine the historical data for yourself and conclude for yourself whether or not you believe that Jesus Christ arose from death. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that right now you have done that and you've come to the same conclusion I have, which is that Jesus Christ died and rose again on the third day, claiming to be God, and that he's ascended on high. And so you can conclude that much with the Christian. So if you're at that point, then I don't believe that the transmigration of the soul is an option for you to believe. And here's why. First off, Christ resurrecting makes no real sense if the doctrine of the transmigration of the soul is true. And this actually bears out in Hindu scriptures themselves, and not only and Hindu tradition itself. So, for example, in Hinduism, one of the avatars of one of their gods is a man named Krishna. And there are many miraculous stories regarding Krishna. And Krishna is kind of like a messianic figure within Hinduism. He is a god, kind of not really incarnate, but he's an avatar of God living on earth. And Krishna does some amazing things, but according to Hinduism, Krishna has actually died and his body is still venerated. His ashes, that is, are still venerated in a temple that is dedicated to him. So Krishna himself did not return from death. But if you believe in Hinduism, that actually makes sense, because the goal of Hinduism is not resurrection. The goal of Hinduism is to be sort of united into, you sort of cease to exist, and you're united into the broader cosmos. You become one with the divine cosmos in this way. And this is actually the goal of Hinduism. So, and that state is called nirvana. Nirvana is mistakenly believed by a lot of people to be a place, but from my reading, which some Hindus can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here, it seems to me that nirvana is actually more like a state of being, and you're united to the universe in this way. So since that's their goal, it makes sense then that Krishna, upon his death, would not want to be rejoined into the body. They have kind of a similar belief to Gnosticism, in that I think they tend to see the body and the physical world as something that is bad, or if not bad, they certainly see it as a deception. They call it Maya. It's not reality. Reality is the spiritual higher reality, and then there's this lower reality that's just Maya. So Krishna entered into Maya as I think it's Vishnu entered into Maya as an avatar, that being Krishna, and that avatar interacted with the Maya, but upon his death, he's dead, and he doesn't want to be alive again. He wants to be freed from the Maya. Okay, so that's which actually, I'm not sure. Hindus can correct me if I'm wrong, but since Krishna is an avatar, not an incarnation, I'm not sure that Krishna has a soul independent of Vishnu. So maybe he goes back to being Vishnu after his death, or maybe Krishna is an actual being still somehow. I actually don't know how that works. Somebody who's part of the Hare Krishna or Hindu movement can explain that to me if you wish. But no real bearing on what we're talking about, other than to say that in Hinduism you have these figures, these sort of gods in avatar form, coming and interacting with mankind, and yet they don't have resurrection. Because why would they? They have the concept of reincarnation for human beings, and the concept of reincarnation for animals and these things, but the goal of Hinduism is ultimately to stop being part of this cycle. There's other traditions that believe in reincarnation that don't necessarily have that goal of cessation of existence, though. So, but in all of these, there's a common, so for example, Plato seems to have believed in reincarnation, and he didn't believe in a cessation of existence or a nirvana state. He seems to have believed in an immortal soul that perpetually goes through these reincarnations over and over again. And for Plato, the goal is to attain enlightenment through gaining wisdom, and you gain wisdom in your life. And then hopefully, I guess, maybe you can take it with you into the next. And so you're perpetually advancing in great wisdom. But nevertheless, there's no incarnation in Plato's thought. And in fact, I think to some degree in Plato's thought, there is a goal of coming into a higher state as a higher being and becoming purely spiritual. In the Gnostic tradition, like I said, this is most certainly present, where the goal is you sort of reincarnate until you become a spirit being who is free from the flesh. And there are some traditions that say that this is actually what happened to Enoch, and he became an archangel named Metatron. That's not a Christian belief, but it's a belief that was held by some people like Gnostics, and some Gnostics, not all Gnostic groups believed that. And I think that there are some Kabbalist groups that still actually believe that Enoch did that. So all of that is part of this, though. And there's actually, even within Hinduism, or maybe it's in occultism that's based in Hinduism, I have a difficult time discerning some of these things. So I don't know if there are any Hindus who believe this. Next part, but I do know that there are some occult people who attribute this belief to Hinduism and who believe that mankind reincarnates, and that particularly light-skinned Anglo people can reincarnate as angels. So they are released from, so their belief is this comes out of the 1800s, and the belief is in a Hindu kind of reincarnation, but with the belief that, and it's tied in with a belief in evolution as well. So there's a belief in reincarnation mixed in with a belief in evolution, Darwinian evolution, that is, wherein their belief was, or maybe is, I don't know if there's any people who still believe this, but their belief was that the sort of chain of evolution built up over time because of reincarnation. So these souls were reincarnating and evolving into higher and higher beings. And then even once humanity came onto the scene, that was like the highest, but even humanity then has these levels, which they have a very racist way of setting up these levels, which is similar to the ones that you can see in any early Darwinist materials that depict, African people as being quote unquote less evolved than Anglo people, etc. So you have this sort of chain of events, and then once you've attained to the level of spiritual highs that enable you to evolve as a spiritual being into a Anglo-Saxon person, after that, when you die, you become an angelic being. And so this is how that occult sect understood the existence of the angelic powers. So I realize that I've gone into a lot of details about various ways that reincarnation has been taught, But I don't believe any of those make sense in light of the resurrection of Christ, because Jesus Christ doesn't ascend into becoming an angelic being. He doesn't allow his body to even see corruption. He doesn't leave his body in the grave and come back as something else. He doesn't escape the physical and become a spirit being or enter into a state of blissful nirvana wherein he ceases to exist. Instead, he returns in his physical body and resurrects. He resurrects his physical body and is fully human still, and so he is still united to the physical body and still united to the human nature. So this would seem to suggest that our Lord Jesus Christ does not have any place for a reincarnation, since this would make the resurrection either irrelevant, unnecessary, or meaningless. And clearly it is none of those things, since this is the crowning act of victory over the grave. Another point that I would make to this that's related is that Christianity doesn't just posit the resurrection of Jesus Christ, but actually posits a general resurrection of all creation at the end, at the second coming, or the parousia, as we call it. So in the parousia, all of human beings will be resurrected from the grave, those who have done good and repented and believed the gospel, who have come into the Christian faith and been brought up into right relationship with God and done good works. These will be brought into the resurrection of glory. But those who have been wicked and turned away from God and worshipped demons and all of these things, those ones will be in the resurrection of condemnation. But all of humanity will be raised from the dead. This again does not make any sense if you believe in reincarnation, because if you believe in reincarnation, then someone could be damned after one lifetime, but saved after another lifetime, but then damned after another lifetime. And it has all these problems. Another problem with reincarnation for the idea of the general resurrection is, why even have a general resurrection if people are reincarnating all the time? It doesn't make any sense. And this is one of the reasons why belief in the resurrection, belief in reincarnation, is tied in with belief in Darwinian evolution, because part of belief in reincarnation can lead to a belief in the eternal existence of the universe and in the sort of higher and higher life forms theory that is very conducive to the idea of Darwinian evolution. And by the way, Hinduism actually taught evolution theory long before Darwin did. I have no way, I don't know if Charles Darwin was influenced by Hinduism or not. I kind of doubt it. But even if he was or wasn't, it wouldn't matter, because as a Christian, I believe that both Charles Darwin and the gods of Hinduism are demonic in nature. So Darwin's theory could have been inspired by the same demons who inspired Hinduism, and they just used a different method of deceiving different people. But nevertheless, the point is that that these things are related. This idea of incarnation is then related to this idea of Darwinian evolution that is so prevalent. So, but the idea of the general resurrection would seem to me to negate that theory, because you don't have people being resurrected after they've lived hundreds of lifetimes as a dog in a tree and and a fish and a man and all these things. You have instead people being resurrected after they have the Bible says that you are appointed, it is appointed unto a man once to die, and after this the judgment. And then in the last days there will be a final judgment at the time of the general resurrection, when the sheep will be separated from the goats, as Jesus gave a parable where this happens, and where those on his right hand would be blessed, but those on his left hand would be cursed. So you have all of these elements in the resurrection, and all of these elements seem to me as though they conflict with the idea of reincarnation, because the very idea of reincarnation assumes that people are having this, that people are having these successive lifetimes and lifespans as different creatures, and as different entities and all kinds of things, which can't happen in light of the resurrection. It also has another related problem, which is that in Christianity, we believe that after death is, as I said, the judgment. So we've been talking about that in this book, that there's the judgment. But if you believe in a judgment, then this doesn't really make any sense with the idea of the transmigration of the soul either. Now, on the face of it, somebody might say, well, that, people who believe in the transmigration of the soul also believe in a judgment, because you have these different these entities judging you on whether or not you lived a good life to determine what your next life will be like. And that may be that may be true in those religions. That may be how they look at it. But when Christianity talks about the judgment, it's a once for all judgment. So this is the point that St. Paul is making when he says it is appointed unto a man once to die, and after this the judgment, is that he's actually making the point that there isn't a second chance. There isn't another chance after death to repent, that once or to do good works or anything, once you are dead, you are dead, and that's it. And you're judged on the basis of the life that you actually lived. That makes no sense if you're going to get another chance in reincarnation. And I would argue that he would have said that. Don't worry if you don't make it in this life. Just try again. Try to do better the second time around. There is no second time around. Once you're dead, there's the judgment. You face the judgment. Another problem with this idea of reincarnation, so we've seen the resurrection of Christ as a problem for reincarnation, and we've seen the resurrection of people in the last days and the judgment. All of these are problems for the idea of reincarnation. There's another problem that I have, which this one I think could be applied universally. So I don't think you have to be a Christian to understand why this particular issue is a problem. That's the issue of ghosts. People all over the world have, whether it's in India or the US, have encounters with beings that they believe to be ghosts. People all over the world have encounters with, and this happens in the first world, and it happens in the third world. It happens to so-called superstitious people. It happens to religious people. It happens to atheists. It happens to all kinds of people. I myself have visited lots of supposedly haunted locations, and I myself have had experiences. My wife and I have captured photos of entities that I believe are paranormal. And you're free to examine those photos if you want to. Feel free to leave a comment. And if you guys want to see that, maybe I'll do a show about that. Point being, I believe that there's such a thing as life after death in the form of spirits, in the form of ghosts, in the form of other things. Now, I also believe that there are demonic entities. The Bible talks about familial spirits, which are demonic entities that imitate deceased relatives. So I believe that that's a true occurrence as well, but I don't believe that that accounts for all paranormal activity. And the church has never taught that that accounted for all paranormal activity. So people do encounter deceased human spirits. People do encounter all kinds of paranormal entities, but that is something that makes no sense if, in fact, the transmigration of the soul is a reality. If the transmigration of the soul is a reality, then there should be no such thing as ghosts in particular, because the fact, how is a ghost haunting a place if he's been reincarnated as a dog or a cow or a pig or a fruit fly or whatever? How is a ghost haunting someplace if he's been reincarnated? And in fact, this also gets into the ancient Greek beliefs, because a lot of ancient Greek philosophers actually did believe in these seemingly contradictory things. They believed that there were both ghosts and reincarnation. So if you know if you know of any sources wherein they claim to be able to reconcile these two beliefs, or if you yourself, my viewers, think that you have a way of reconciling these beliefs, I would love to hear it, and maybe I'll do future videos where I respond to those critiques. Or maybe you want to come on the show and debate me about whether or not you think that ghosts and reincarnation can coexist. But I personally think that it seems very odd, and it seems very implausible that you could leave behind a ghost at death, but also be reincarnated as something else. Because if your spirit is being reincarnated, then it can't be haunting a location. And this brings me to another Christian objection to reincarnation, which is the idea of what happens after the judgment. So in Christianity, it's actually a misnomer. A lot of people think that in Christianity, we teach that when you die, you go directly to heaven or hell immediately. That's actually not exactly correct. The idea of heaven and the idea of hell are things that exist in the new earth after the resurrection. So after the resurrection, people experience eternal conscious blessing or eternal conscious torment as a result of the life that they lived, and as a result of whether or not they had a relationship with God. However, in between the time of our resurrection, of our death and our resurrection, we experience either the bliss of what's called paradise, or we experience Hades, which is why in the Orthodox Church we talk about the harrowing of hell, or the harrowing of Hades. That was when Jesus descended into the lower depths, into the place of the dead, and rescued those Old Testament saints, and potentially even people who had not been part of the people of Israel, but who after death had realized that they were wrong. And so since Jesus Christ hadn't come yet, now he was in the place of the dead, and St. Peter says that he preached to those who were held captive in the place of death. And it seems to a lot of people, myself included, that if he's preaching to them, that implies that at least in that particular instance, they were able to come and repent. And so that's why in a lot of Christian traditions, they talk about at the harrowing of hell, that like Plato and Socrates and these guys were saved, not because they were Christians, but because at the harrowing of hell, they heard the preaching of Christ and repented. I'm not saying that that's what happened. All I'm saying is that that's part of what a lot of Christians believe, and I do happen to be one of the Christians who believes that, but I don't think I don't think any individual pre-Christian philosopher or something could be proven to be among those saved. So that's not what I'm arguing for. But I am saying that what that belief demonstrates is that in Christianity, we do not believe that the human soul can be in two places at once. You are either in hell or you're in heaven. You are either on the new earth or you are in hell for eternity. But none of those options imply or allow for the transmigration of the soul. So those who are held captive awaiting the day of the dread judgment seat of Christ, those who are held captive in a place of torment, which the Old Testament calls Sheol and the New Testament calls Hades, those who are held captive in that place awaiting the resurrection when they will have face their ultimate judgment, they are not being reincarnated as a pig or a dog or a vegetable or another human person. They're not being reincarnated in some way. Instead, they're awaiting the judgment. And those who are in paradise with God awaiting the resurrection and their final reward in the body, those people are not being reincarnated as a dog, a fish, a bird, or another man, because they are with Christ in paradise awaiting their future glory. So none of this allows for the existence of some kind of transmigration of the soul. Now, I realize that most of these arguments are really exclusively valid if you've first accepted Christianity, but I really think that you don't have to be a Christian to accept the existence of the paranormal and to accept the existence of ghosts. And I don't believe that you can affirm the existence of ghosts and affirm reincarnation consistently. Obviously, there's people who believe both of these realities, but I don't think you can do so consistently. Well, actually, I think I'm going to stop there, and maybe we'll do some future videos on this topic, because I would love to hear from you guys what you guys think. But for right now, the basic point is that reincarnation is not compatible with the Christian faith because of our belief in the resurrection of Christ, the general resurrection of the dead, and the intermediate state between the time of death and the time of resurrection, in which people are in a place of paradise or a place of torment awaiting the general resurrection. I also don't believe that the belief in reincarnation can rationally be held in light of the fact that there is lots of demonstrable evidence of the survival of the soul after death in ways that are not reincarnation. So in haunting of houses, in ghostly apparitions, in all kinds of things that, unless you're going to say are all just demonic, which I guess you could argue that, but then I think that it still, if demons, well, we can get into that another time, why I don't believe that they're all demonic. But unless you're going to say that all of them are demonic, that every instance of a haunted house and every instance of things that are ghostly are inherently demonic, I think that if you're not willing to go to that extreme, then you can't claim reincarnation, because the existence of a spiritual realm of ghosts and of a spiritual realm that includes deceased human persons who have left their bodies, this seems like it very clearly negates the possibility of there being a transmigration of the soul or reincarnation taking place. So those are my I think I had 4 arguments there. Those are my basic 4 arguments. If you want to see any of those fleshed out more fully, if you want to see more resources regarding these things, or if you want to see further discussion on this, please tell me so in the comments section below. Hopefully this video was helpful for you. If it is, please share it with your friends so that they too can be freed indeed.